You are listening to AVIAPRENEURS podcast. This is Adnan Baranbo. Hello from Dubai. In this episode, we are going to discuss how airlines, airports, and aviation companies can manage their content properly and how can they deliver controlled information and reliable information to frontline employees timely with a guest that has more than 16 years of experience in the aviation industry. Good morning, Thomas. Good morning, Thomas Vogel.
Good morning, Adnan.
Thank you for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for hosting me.
I'm very happy to have you with me today. So, Thomas, you are a Swiss electric engineer, and we all know what Swiss means in the world of quality. You have an MBA in general management, and you are the co-founder and the CEO of Yonder, a software solution that provide an easy-to-use content management software that's designed specifically for controlled information. You're also an officer in the Swiss Army. You have been there for serving as an active reserve for more than 16 years. And with this experience, you are the best one to discuss the topic of this episode. So I'm going to start with Yonder. You provide solutions to airlines in various areas: quality, manuals, rules and regulations, and control centers. Can you explain to us how Yonder help airlines in this area?
Sure, yes. So first of all, let's start in the airline with the frontline use case. So frontline employees for everybody who is not working in the office, but needs to have access to controlled documents. And in airlines, this is namely operation manuals, OMA, B, C, D, right? As you all know it. And these people need to access those information whilst in flight. So the solution actually provides an offline application where you can sync the entire manuals. And from my own experience, when I was working as an EFB administrator in Swiss some years back in the past, we were syncing tons of documents, thousands of documents to people, and they lost overview of what was valid and what was relevant to them. So our proposition is that we actually convert those documents into XML documents. So it's not a paper or a PDF anymore, but actually made up of a lot of blocks, which you can filter for different use cases. So you can basically say, I'm an A330 pilot and I only want to see what is relevant to me. And you can filter dynamically on the go. So you can further filter down and say, I'm landing in Dubai in 2 hours time. What do I need to know in terms of ground equipment available in Dubai? And that is the frontline case. So we make the information reliable and filtered available to the guy out in the field. Furthermore, we can also tell very exactly where the changes are in a document, and also on a very small block level. So you don't have to send a document, please read this PDF of 1,500 pages, best regards, CEO, but you actually say, this is only relevant for people operating out of Dubai, for example. And then you can get them a notification and they can read it and also delete the notification so they know they're up to date. And that's the frontline use case, right? And that's what got us started. The quality and compliance is behind it, right? So typically all those operation manuals are controlled by NAAs, by regulators, and you have a lot of regulations to fulfill in your documents. And when the regulations change, the editors of the manuals want to know, okay, in my country, regulation XYZ has changed. And what we have developed is a solution where you can interface with compliance databases and import standards from national aviation authorities and then link them to your manuals. So whenever you have, for example, here in Europe, we use the EASA regulation framework. You have an update of EASA Oro Gen 145, I don't know. You can link this to the place in your manuals, and then you get automatically a change request thrown where you can actually make sure that your compliance team can update the manuals and that you're always compliant. The link to the frontline is that you don't often or not always need to tell the front-end users that you changed something because a regulation changed. Sometimes this is only important for the auditors. Sometimes it's only important for the quality team. And sometimes it's important for everybody. And what I explained with the notifications about the changes, you can trigger those notifications based on the actual changes. So you can trigger this very deliberately. And with this, you can make sure that people actually read what they have to read and they don't see the changes that are not relevant to them or that you look up anyway. Going back to the example I used with ground equipment in Dubai, most probably you're going to look up the phone number of the station manager anyway upon landing, and you don't need a notification that it has changed because you don't know it by heart. Whereas if a procedure has changed that you knew by heart for 35 years, engine on fire, because you introduced the Airbus procedures, then it might be very good to inform everybody that this procedure has changed. And kind of control we give to the airlines, to the editing team, to the quality team, to make sure that the users are on top of things. And at the same time, you automate the update of the quality standards that are behind the operation manuals.
What you mentioned is really revolutionary. It really changed how airlines actually do business. But how is the response of the airlines to this solution?
It is, like you say, it's a big change management topic. So we see two things. So we see some projects where they say, I know that I have to do something different, but I don't know yet how and why. And then this gets very rocky sometimes because people have a PDF or a piece of paper in mind, but they need to arrive in the digital reality. And then you see other companies, especially smaller operators or newly founded airlines, that's still the case today, that say, I need to be efficient. And by this, they mean I need to be digital from day one. And there you can very easily say, look, this is how you best go from zero to rollout. And then it's usually a lot easier to get this transition done. It helps that we have 15 customers in the meantime. So we can tell people, look, we've done Airbus before. We've done Boeing manuals before. We have done it. We have worked in your country before. We have worked with multi-AOC airlines before, and then transmit this, sometimes also using the help of our existing customers. So we try to get the customers connected by our user conference. We occasionally ask our customers, can we show some manuals to another customer? And typically the answer is yes. And that helps the change management project. We had cases where the CEO of the company told me at the first day of the project that my mission was to report to him when somebody doesn't want to follow the standard way. The project was super efficient, delivered on time, but the change management then came after the project. So it takes a lot of time to make this transition into the digital world. And that's not something you can force. It's not something you can blame on people. Many of those people have been doing business the way they did business for many, many years. And at the same time, cost pressure and also the speed of how things change has accelerated due to various stuff, not just COVID, but COVID has helped in this respect. Things do change very, very quickly. And there you can catch people. You can tell people your life will become easier in the midterm. You need to push it over that digital finish line. And once you're done so, you can actually have a more efficient life afterwards. But this is a constant challenge. It helps a lot that I have worked in big organizations like the Lufthansa Group before. It helps a lot that I know different cultural backgrounds, because very often it's not a question about the facts. It's a question about how do you introduce the change, right? And especially when we're talking about your region, I worked in the Middle East quite often in my past company. And this helps a lot to understand different culture, to see where you go at. Why are things different in a certain part of the world? And it's not a good idea to force change on somebody. I do take pride in being Swiss. I do take pride in our heritage of providing quality work, but I don't think that the Swiss way is always the best way. You need to adapt it to the local circumstances, and you always need to see where does somebody come from. If you're looking at carriers who've been around for a long time, who have merged with different cultures, that's a whole different story than if you have a new airline being set up as a subsidiary of an existing company, or even a new airline that's being set up as a new business model. We have all three kinds of carriers as customers, and this also makes it very challenging and exciting to work with our customers.
Thomas, I'm very impressed. You have given us in 5 minutes a masterclass on how to make a change management plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So your solution, Yonder, was created originally for the airline industry. But from what I'm hearing from you, this can be applied to any industry. And this, have you really applied it to other industries?
Yes, we have. So basically, we always wanted to grow beyond aviation simply for the fact of market size. We started the product as an industry agnostic solution, and we always dubbed it as not yet another pilot application, because we all came from the airline world and we knew the green font on black background, and we said, this is not the way to go, right? Anybody who has seen the LPC FS Plus applications from Airbus knows what I'm talking about. We have then started in aviation because focus is key when you get something started, amassed some 10 customers in aviation, and then Corona hit. So of course, Corona has slowed expansion in the aviation market because a lot of stuff was on hold. And at the same time, it has accelerated our venture into other industries. So we basically targeted other industries that also suffer from lengthy regulations, from lengthy documents that are controlled. Controlled means not every user can just make a change. So you need somebody approving the changes, maybe an authority. And we ventured out into different industries. And what came back very clearly is the energy sector. So we're supplying a solution to the Swiss national grid operator. Defense, so everything that has to do with military and police, we do see the same issues. You have people out in the field with a device nowadays, very different regulations, and you need to find out what can I do, what can't I do. And these industries are already live. So the Swiss Armed Forces is a customer of ours. We're talking to a couple of other armed forces organizations here in Europe, and we do have quite a strong pipeline in police. Here we take the Swiss approach, start in your home market and then grow beyond, just because the regulations are different in every country. And that's the key difference to aviation. And that's why we'll always be true to our heritage of aviation, because aviation by its nature is a global business. So if you can do it in Europe, you can also do it in the Middle East and in Africa and in America and in Australia. Of course, you have different local standards, but the procedures are the same. The planes are the same, and that makes aviation so interesting. And the other thing that helps us a lot with our aviation heritage, when you tell a prospect that your solution works in an airline, they say typically, well, then it's good enough for us. Because aviation is highly regulated, highly dangerous, potentially deadly, and people always think they know what aviation is all about because every now and then they fly. So that has helped us a lot. For the future, we're also looking at industries such as medtech and pharma, whereas there the big thing is that we don't speak the language, right? So we know what controlled documents are, etc., but we don't speak the language like we do it in aviation, and that's been hindering so far. But energy, defense, and policing, there is a cross overlap between our competences. Like you mentioned, I'm an active reserve officer in the Swiss Armed Forces. We have a lot of people in Switzerland who still do military service because we have an active reserve system. So there naturally, you can talk about stuff, the language, the people, and that helps a lot. Venturing out into defense and police sectors in other countries is more difficult. But once we have a few good showcases from Switzerland, then we can grow this beyond Switzerland. We're also willing to grow this beyond, and we are able to grow this beyond because we have the network and the global coverage, and also because Switzerland is still a neutral country, whatever this means in today's highly difficult times. But when you come to another country and speak to an armed force as a Swiss person, it's typically very easy to get to the right person. And that has helped us a lot in getting into contact with other European armed forces.
Your story is very inspiring because it gives all the aviapreneurs hope that when they start their aviation business, the opportunity is actually much bigger than the aviation industry itself. They can actually expand to globally to many other countries and to many other industries. I'm moving now to the way how you deliver Wonder. SaaS, SaaS, or software as a service. I think this is how you are delivering Yonder to your customers. What is your experience with this business model of how software is delivered compared to the other business models of software delivery?
I think it has made life a lot easier for both the supplier and the customer. just for the fact that you can upgrade, downgrade, buy additional licenses without all the coverage that is required in terms of having technical infrastructure on site. We use Aviation hosting for our airline customers because that's a global cloud. So we can guarantee that in all places all over the world, there is decent coverage when people need to sync their devices and things like that. And it's also very easy to scale the resources on such a cloud. And that is especially important in dynamic times as we see them today, where people upgrade, downgrade, increase, decrease their fleet sizes, and that has helped a lot. We see there has been a big move towards software as a service in the B2B market in the, I would say, last 3 to 5 years. Before that, people were still thinking, can you give me the box with the software CD inside? And that's gone these days. And also from a contractual point of view, it makes life a whole lot easier because you don't need to have acceptance testing and all these kind of things because you're buying a product that's off the shelf. In terms of support, it's a lot easier. We have 24/7 support, of course, for our software. It's being monitored on a technical level, as well as there is a hotline for eventual emergencies with our customers. And this you can provide to much cheaper conditions if you can divide the efforts globally to all the customers than if you have this on site. Nevertheless, what we still have to do, especially for the Swiss Armed Forces, but also for a couple of other customers, is that we have to provide on-site or on-premise hosting. That's something we can do. True to our nature of finding a solution for the customer, it's more effort, it's more pricey, of course, but it's doable. And I think also in the Middle East region, from what I hear from prospects, in certain countries of the Middle East, you still do have requirements in terms of having the data in the same country, in a data center, etc. We can do this from a technical point of view. If we have to do this in a country in the Middle East, we prefer to do this through a local partner. That's true to my experience from my previous company in the Middle East. It helps a lot if you have somebody in the country who understands the rules, who understands the culture, and at the same time also understands the business model that we have. But software as a service, I think also when you look at it from a higher perspective, it's something that has gained foot in the entire business-to-business market. And also if I see how many calls I get from investors who try to invest in us, because software as a service is definitely something you want to have in your portfolio today, I think this is really the future.
You just mentioned how entrepreneurial you are on finding solutions that meet your clients' expectations and requirements. So normally when we see a startup, we expect a single entrepreneur, maybe 2 co-founders. But in your case, you have 4 co-founders. How did you meet? How did you agree, all 4 of you, on a problem that is worth solving?
Okay, so how did we meet? I met Mark, one of my co-founders, in the military over 20 years ago. So we were in conscript school together. And the other 2, Christoph and Alex, I met when I was EFB administrator and head of e-operations at Swiss. So they were in my team. And Mark and I share a long passion of creating things together. So this true entrepreneurial thing. And Christoph, Alex, and I share the vision of the product together. So we built 3 generations of documentation software before we built Yonder in Swiss internally. And we always said, half jokingly, half seriously, at some point, we're going to commercialize this. And the time came when our first customer, the Swiss Armed Forces or the Swiss Air Force, called me and said, yeah, Tom, you're involved in Swiss with all these documentation things. We need something like this. Can you help us? And I said, of course, right? So I was running straight to Mark, Christoph, and Alex and say, let's do this. And Mark and I were doing the business part, and Christoph and Alex were doing the technical part. And that's true to this very day. So Alex and Christoph are responsible for the product development, and Mark and I are responsible for the commercial side of the business. And that's how we met. And that's why we can coexist with 4 founders. You probably couldn't have 4 tech founders or 4 business founders. But if you have a mix of business and technical founders, I think it's quite a worthwhile setup.
So the 4 of you are actually involved and working in the business. Do you have a mechanism that ensure collaborative decision-making and problem-solving?
We do have a very broad management team. So besides the founding team, we also have somebody taking care of the operations and somebody taking care of the customer aspects of our business. And the decisions are made in this management board meeting or executive team meeting. And this happens once a week. And we typically take decisions very fast. And also we recall decisions if we see that the world around has changed us. And here we really letting ourselves be guided by the error culture that we know from aviation. And that's also something to all the aviapreneurs out there where we can promote ourselves as being aviators. The error culture is remarkable. If you do something wrong and if you own up, if you speak about your error, in most of the aviation companies, you're not having any consequences. Very on the contrary, people think you're reflective, you're a professional. And if you hide the mistake or try to blame somebody else, then you'll have a problem. And that's what we're living by. Of course, we have made many decisions that we had to revert later on. Especially when you build a product, at some point you need to scale it, you need to refactor it. That's very normal. We're in the midst of this process. We will rewrite the entire offline application to be more powerful, more performant. That's part of the game. And I wouldn't go as far as blaming anybody, but this is just not natural of what you have to do. And in this way, we solve all the problems. The second thing, what we do, because we're still not a huge company, we're 35 people, we make changes to the organization if and when required. So it's not that it's a birthright to be the CEO. It's not that my duties are fixed over time. And if I see we need to change something, we have somebody's strength in a certain area, but there is a weakness we need to compensate for, we make adaptations to the organization. That has worked very well with our founding team, and it has also worked very well with our investors. They understand why we do this. They see the professionalism behind it, and I think that's a tribute to the aviation genes we all carry.
You just made my day when you use the word aviapreneur today in more than one place, which means the word
of course.
is actually currently part of the jargon in the airline industry.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So you're just mentioning the team here, and that you also have a team. You're currently 35 employees. But at the same time, Yonder is little less than 7 years company, and it's not long enough to have this number of people. How were you able, as a startup, to attract these experienced employees to leave their established companies and join a startup with the amount of risks involved in startup business?
I think that's a key limiting factor to any growing organization, is finding the right people. Finding people is easy, finding the right people is hard. And I think aviation, once again, to make your day, Adnan, is still a big attractor. People like being related to aviation. People like the flying business. It's an interesting field to work in. It's very fast moving. It's very international, and that's certainly one of the key hooks that has helped us get many people involved with us. In terms of risk, I think we have really selected our investors very carefully. We have a nice mix of investors from local investors here in Switzerland, other entrepreneurs who have done this before, people we worked with before, but also institutional investors like a couple of banks that actually have investment funds here in Switzerland. And that gives some kind of security that this is not just something that comes into business and ceases to exist tomorrow, but there's actually a solid foundation behind it. In terms of the skills, I'll be very open with you. There is a lot of luck involved. So at some point you realize somebody is maybe not the right guy for this job. We had a few people leaving the company. We had a few people we had to ask to leave the company just because the company developed. And we also were very lucky in finding some people with excellent skills at the right time. And I think that's part of an entrepreneur's life, is luck, to be honest. If you think everything is by plan, I'll have to disappoint you. Luck always plays a big role. And I think that's also fair enough to admit this, because I'm sure to all the other aviapreneurs out there, this has happened as well.
I think luck is distributed equally to everyone. The difference is, are we prepared or not? Because luck comes to everyone, people might not be prepared to receive it. So as long as you receive it, which means you are an aviapreneur.
That's it. I think what is also important to say, I have to be very, very grateful to my home country. It's a great place to start a business, even though we complain like everybody else all over the planet about the administrative regulations. But in starting a company in Switzerland, where you have a market, where you have some security about what the administration does and how the rules work, and also where you have a very good market of technical people, that's a true blessing to start a company. If I look at other places all over the world, you don't have to go far, then I have to say we're really lucky here in Switzerland.
Indeed. So, Thomas, what a remarkable journey. What an amazing experience. Now we need to hear from you. What advice do you give to all the aviapreneurs listening to us today? These aviapreneurs who are willing to start businesses, startups, and solutions that are going to change how the aviation industry do business. What do you recommend them to do?
I would recommend to them to build a product that works for more than one customer. I think that's the biggest danger in aviation. A lot of people are on high alertness in aviation. So this typical pilot image, right? I see a red lamp and then I need to land immediately. And that gives rise to very quick changes in the product strategy in the very early stage. And at some point, you need to start building a product that works for all the airlines or operators out there. And of course, that's difficult. Of course, you cannot fulfill this in the first go. But listening too much on a single customer in the beginning, I think that's very, very dangerous. And at the same time, you have to, because otherwise you're not selling something. Listen to the market and not to an individual person, and try to integrate the market needs into a solution that works for everybody. The second thing I would advise to people is aviation is a complex business. Get away from the idea that a simple solution will work. We have paid our money to get the hands on OMBs, on regulations, on workflows, on whatever else there was needed to make the solution viable for an airline. If you can do this, then the world will be open to you, because if, as I said before, if you say it works in an airline, then people will look up and say, okay, then it might also work for my company. And I think that's the key thing where you can succeed as an aviapreneur. And if you link this with the error culture I was also mentioning before, and don't think you know everything from the first go, and you're not shy admitting that you made a mistake, then I think the aviapreneurs community is well prepared to create products that serve other industries as well.
Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your advice and all the information and experience you have shared with us today.
Thank you very much, Adnan, for hosting me.
Thank you, fellow aviapreneurs. We learned a lot from Thomas. Let's go and build. Let's innovate. Let's start new businesses. Have a great day. See you next week with another aviapreneur and another success story.